Welcome to the Sub 1000 Recruitment Podcast. With so much of the recruitment industry conversation aimed at big enterprise talent acquisition teams, we decided recruiters at smaller everyday organizations need to be heard. In 2023, we launched our free-to-join Sub 1000 online community. We have thousands of in-house recruiters and HR professionals from everyday organizations who recruit less than 1,000 staff a year, in some cases less than 100. And if you are listening to this, you've probably guessed the next bit. We've also launched a podcast to hear direct from those recruiters. Their stories, insights and experiences about how they get the job done on a limited budget with limited support in either a small team or perhaps completely on their own. Tune in every fortnight to hear from your direct peers. And if you want to get involved, join our free online community at sub1000.com.
Hi everyone, welcome to another Sub 1000 podcast. In today's episode, we're joined by Froya, who is a seasoned expert in talent acquisition, mainly across the UK tech and data sectors. So really great having you on the call today, Froya. We start every podcast with the same two questions. So we want to find out how you first started in recruitment and also a little bit about your experience today. So question number one for you, Froya, is just share with us how you first started out in recruitment and how you got into it.
Thank you, Ben. It's really nice to be able to be on the podcast. I've followed it for a while through the Sub 1000 communities. Is quite exciting to join you on it. Yes, I started in TA initially when I studied HR back in university. And through that, I also did an internship as a HR coordinator. And I was always drawn to the talent side during my studies for a few reasons. And a lot of that came down to the fact that if you look at HR as a whole, there's quite a lot of firefighting. There's quite a bit of kind of policy work, employment laws, all of these kind of things, while my interests very much laid around the talent and people side. And the reason for that is that you can quite directly see the impact that you have on the organization is very measurable. And as well as that, it's a bit of a competitiveness within the kind of search for talent and that process. So I ended up then after uni seeking towards the talent side and started my recruitment career that way by going after that as a graduate job.
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting journey there to get started. So tell us a little bit about your most recent experience for you and what have you been up to?
Yeah, sure. So after university, I started an agency and did that for about 3.5 years. So initially, that was very much headhunting based within the tech space, solely focusing on the Norwegian tech market initially and really kind of focusing on the engineering side of that, so software engineering. During the pandemic, I then moved internally just to be closer to the business and really see the direct long-term impact of the work that I do and the people that I bring into the business. So I initially did 2 shorter assignments for fintechs before I moved into RVU, which is where I'm at now. So what I'm doing here is a very broad all-round TA role. So that includes hands-on recruitment of everything data within the business and our brands, as well as design. So that's my core focus here. And in addition to that, it's everything TA operations, employer branding, all kind of project work that you do find in talent acquisition functions. So quite a nice and broad role. And in addition to that, I do line manage one recruitment coordinator.
So first question for you before you're in today's podcast is, how do you ensure a positive candidate experience, especially for those roles that are in the technology and data sector and they might come with their own unique challenges?
They very much do. I'm sure anyone working within similar fields will agree that it is a very competitive market space. And I think what it just comes down to is really just making people feel valued and respected as people within this process. And really just having that focus on the fact that every conversation you have with them is a two-way conversation rather than a Q&A. So the number one principle that we do have with any of our interview processes is really just focus on great communication, making sure that we keep people updated, that they hear from us regularly. So for me, regularly means every kind of 24 to 48 hours at least, just knowing what's going on and staying updated and just having a very transparent process. And sometimes things change within the process, that's okay, but it's all about just communicating that so that people never have to wonder or question what's going on. On the other side of that as well, just in terms of the interviews, it's all about making sure you set them up so that both sides gain something through that process. So for us, what that means is that we design our interviews in a way that you always set aside time, both at the start and at the end of the conversation, for candidates to ask questions and really just be able to gain knowledge into who we are and the role. And the managers just being trained to actually sell the role and the company throughout the conversation, just as much as the candidates sell themselves. And as well as that, in order for us to continue to improve on that experience as well, we do look at data of our interviews, how many people go through the processes, how is that going, do we have dropout rates, those kind of things. And as well as that, just taking on board ad hoc feedback that we do get from candidates and hiring managers, just to make sure that we can continue to tweak our interviews, and as well as that, continue to train our hiring managers in interviews to keep improving that experience. More recently, we've also started trialing a tool for survey to be sent out to candidates after interviews. So early doors, but quite exciting to move that to be a bit more of a structured process as well, just so we can gather that feedback from everyone that's interviewed with us. So fingers crossed that goes well, but it's all about just continue to improve the process, listen to candidates, listen to hiring managers, and make sure that everyone's set up in a way that they're having nice conversations that's conducive to good performance.
And within your recruitment process, Froya, how do you, incorporate, elements to make sure that diversity and inclusive recruitment is kind of there and monitored and kind of does that add to the candidate experience further?
Yeah, good question. So what we do is really focus on the skills and traits that we look at in each candidate rather than the specific industry or degree or university that they come from. So all of our interviews are set up so that the managers or interviewers would have a set of signals that they test for. So we need certain experiences and skills, and that's what they will assess for through the interviews. And this will be consistent across all interviews, just to make sure that we're very fair and consistent in how we speak to people, what we look for, how we assess them at the end. We also then look at the background for each of the people so that we don't require any university degrees, for example, because that's not necessarily the way that everyone gets into the industry. And as well as that, really just looking at that candidate experience in terms of the interviewers that they do meet through the process. So we make sure that interview panels are diverse, and that means not just in terms of genders, but as well as that in terms of maybe the ethnicities or maybe just skill sets across the business. So our analysts, for example, will meet someone from product as well as analytics and really just get a sense of who the business are and the people they would work with. So just making sure that that panel is diverse, both in terms of people and diversity of thought, all of this. And lastly, and very importantly, we do have a interview training that everyone has to go through before they're allowed to interview for the business. And this goes through the way that we would like them to have the conversation, and of course have a section on things like unconscious bias and how you can identify this within yourself and continue to work on that, both from a disability perspective and all the other biases that come into it. So those are the kind of key things that we look at.
Interviews are a really pivotal part of the recruitment process. Can you share with us how you've approached the design or kind of detailed out that interview process to help make sure that both hiring managers and candidates have a really good experience?
Of course. So it all starts with the role in itself and the requirements of it. So each interview is specifically designed for that skill set. So there are variations across each of the interview processes we do for each of the roles. So we always start by looking at what do we need this person to have? What are they going to do when they come into the business? So we then look at just a few different requirements that we have. And then we go from there and decide what assessments we need to bake into it. So for our technical roles, for example, we will have some sort of pairing session to test for the technical skills that we need, as well as some sort of either conversation or presentation stage just to test for the communication side and the collaboration and stakeholder management, etc. So that forms the basis of how we decide what assessments we will do. On top of that, again, is all about just making sure that each of the candidates go into that conversation feeling welcomed and accepted and safe to perform at their best. So on our interviews, we'll always make sure that you have that introduction where it's a bit of an icebreaker, it's a bit of small talk just to kind of warm up and get people comfortable. And then you might go into the assessment, but again, you train your interviewers to make sure that this is meant to be a positive experience. So make sure that, this is a collaborative conversation. It's a two-way thing. You want the candidate to succeed and you want to make sure that you give them that best way of succeeding. So you hold that conversation very much with kindness in mind, and just making sure to make them feel comfortable, nudge them if you need to get them in certain directions, and just do your best to make them comfortable within that assessment, because it can be really, really terrifying to interview, let's be honest. And every interview is designed that way. And then, of course, you finish with a bit of time for the candidate to ask questions. So that should always be the structure of the interview, regardless of whether it's a technical pairing or a conversation or a technical Q&A. It should always have a bit of an intro to warm them up, make them feel comfortable. Then you might go into the assessment, but again, just keep that nice, comfortable feeling and two-way conversation, and then finish with a bit of time at the end for the questions from the candidate.
So during your career, Froya, you've had experience of reviewing and improving or maybe redesigning career sites. So that can often feel quite a big and kind of overwhelming project, and maybe something to do in kind of TA and recruitment. How would you perhaps approach that as a project, or maybe any tips or guidance on perhaps where to start first if people are wanting to start this type of project?
I would say it's always about starting by reviewing what you have. Start by understanding what is your career site, what are the current things that you can improve with the site. So you will review that yourself, have a chat with maybe candidates, and just understand what do they really want to see. The next step from there is always just do a bit of research. Who are your competitors? What do their career site look like? Have a look at the career sites that actually win awards, because there are awards out there. Where we work, for example, won an award for their career site. Have a look at that. Just do your research to really understand what are the best elements of a career site. And then you can start kind of getting a sense for what you might like to include. So we're actually doing our career site at the moment. So that's a project that's ongoing. And what we did after this is I went away and then developed a content plan. So it's always good to start there, because that's something that will lay out the structure of the content, what you want to include, and you can always refer back to that. And it makes it a lot simpler when you have one plan to refer back to, because once you get going, it can be quite daunting to need to kind of iterate on things and develop this site. So after the content plan was developed, it's then always good to work with different people internally to actually get this developed. So whether you might have some designers internally to lean on, maybe you have some content writers, something like this, a PR team, definitely utilize the skills you have internally to actually develop the content. And then I think it's all about just looking at what you're trying to achieve in terms of, you want to make sure that people can get a glimpse into the culture of the business. So have a think for how you'd like to showcase this, whether it's through rich media with pictures of your employees or things that's happening, or maybe you want to just describe certain ERGs or support networks you have, just really try and showcase that culture and make it quite simple for people to see what it would be like to work for the business. And then secondly, one thing that is quite important when it comes to career sites is just giving them a glimpse into not just the roles that you have, but the road they would have to go on in order to achieve and get into one of those roles. So a great tip is also to include some information about the recruitment process, what they should do in terms of the applications that they have and what they can expect so that they can prepare properly. But really just do your research, check your competitors, what their sites are like, check any kind of awards or industry standards, what you should look for, and then speak to candidates, speak to the people internally, and really leverage the skill sets that you have to develop something great.
Acquisition as a sector is obviously forever changing. It's forever moving, and data and tech sector is obviously moving quite fast, purely by the nature of the industry. Um, how do you kind of stay up to date with maybe certain trends in talent acquisition, or more specifically, maybe trends in that data and technology space?
Yeah, there are loads and loads of things out there. So I think just first take a look at what do you specifically want to keep an eye out on. There are so many different things you can do, and it's impossible to stay on top of absolutely everything. So pick the things and the areas that make the most sense for yourself in terms of your interests and your job and what you need to stay up to date with. For myself, I absolutely love the Hungly newsletter, the Brain Food Recruiting newsletter, as well as Joel Lalgy's now gotten one. So those two I follow. On top of that, we're quite big on wanting to build our employer branding and recruitment marketing side. So I've gone out to Adway and follow their newsletters as well as their networking events, and really just putting myself out there to go to those events and get involved there. As well as that, on the data side, I have a relationship with the Data Science Festival, so attending that, for example, which is 6 monthly now, so you can go as much as you'd like there. Um, Really just staying up to date with what other companies are doing, what's happening in the data space. And as well as that, there's of course talent acquisition conferences, which are great. So that will be anything from the IHR, the in-house recruitment conference, which is annual. So that's a really great one to keep an eye on. But really just make sure to keep putting yourself out there, attend events, and follow webinars as well. Pick the companies that make the most sense. So again, Adway is great. Hireful is great. You've got a few good ones there. Smart Recruiters have a few great ones. So just keep attending these things and keep your eye on different newsletters and things, but definitely pick the ones that make the most sense for you, and don't try and stay up to date with absolutely everything, because then you wouldn't have any time to actually do your job. But yeah, there's loads.
And should recruitment be a collaborative effort? And if yes, how would you approach that? What would be your advice to get that collaborative efforts from people who aren't predominantly working in HR, recruitment, or talent functions internally?
This is absolutely no question about it. Yes, it should very much be a collaborative effort. It all starts with the people that you work with, and especially the senior leaders of the business. You really need to make sure that you have buy-in from the senior leaders, because that is then filtered down into the rest of the organization. So absolutely make sure to build that relationship and really focus on the value add of the recruitment team. So make sure that you have some sort of data or KPIs that you can agree with them and report to them with, just to make sure that they see the value that you add and the value of actually investing time and focus into this. Because when that then filters down to the hiring managers, it allows them to spend the time actually partnering closely with you in the job that you do, because the senior leaders also see the benefit of doing that. So I would say that's step number one. It then absolutely is about doing the same with the hiring managers, to make sure that you build that relationship and really understand each other, because when you understand fully their team, what they need, the profiles, all of this, you can do a much, much better job when you then go out sourcing for these people. And similar, when you then find these people, you put them in front of the hiring managers, both the hiring manager and the candidate is going to have a much better experience if there is that initial alignment there and it makes sense why they're speaking to each other. So absolutely, it should be a collaborative effort, just because then you can go so much more targeted. And it's just about showing the value of what you do, showing, what's the impact that comes from actually working closely together and then investing a little bit of time here over a short period of time for that recruitment process. So really just use the data and whatever insight you have into that to really show the specific value, and then make sure that you continue to communicate with them what's happening, how's that process going, and then when you understand and know them better, your work will definitely thrive from it.
So that's the end of another Sub 1000 podcast. So thank you very much, Froya, for your time and sharing your wisdom and your insights. I think there's some really good tips and hints and knowledge you shared there. Everybody, Froya is a member for Sub 1000 community, so she has said that she is happy for people to perhaps reach out to her, maybe tag her in some posts. If there's anything here that you think resonates with you and you just want a little bit more guidance or a few more tips on, then, feel free to kind of reach out. Is that okay for you?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thanks again for your time, Froya, and hopefully everybody's enjoyed the podcast.